Wow. Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Recruiters. You got it with no limits. And we talk about the cutting edge in the staffing industry, all the knowledge. And we do it without no scripts, right, John?
None.
It's always live all the time.
All free form.
I'm here with my sidekick and co-host, John Ruffini, and our special guest today from Florida, Holly Noon.
Welcome, Holly.
Hey, Holly, welcome. Well, we're just going to deep dive into it. And our first topic is we quit. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but like everybody that's getting jobs now is quitting. And I'm going to throw something up there and we're going to have a discussion about this. Look what's going on in Pittsburgh. They're just putting signs out and walking out. Seriously, this is like, what's going on, John and Holly?
You know, it's kind of weird. It's unprecedented where, you know, there's lots of, I don't think I've gone by any business of late that doesn't have a "we're hiring" sign out, but they can't hire anybody because they can't get people to apply and want to work. So I don't know whether it's a combination of, I know a lot of states are starting to scale back and cut out the unemployment benefits from the pandemic and the extensions they put in there. But a lot of it probably, I got to assume, has to do with cultural issues too, where they're saying, hey, you know what, we'll come back to work, but on our terms, not yours. I don't know. It's kind of unprecedented. What are your thoughts, Holly?
Yeah, so I've actually been following articles, and particularly of those in the millennial Gen Z arena, and it tends to be that they want the flexibility, and I think company culture doesn't always lend itself to, kind of work-life balance, or we've been in the pandemic, we've been working, some of us remote for over a year, but then it's like, now we got to go back to the office. And when people are like, hey, maybe, have maybe possibly started a side hustle in the pandemic, and they're like, you know what, I like this more. I'm going to give time to this instead of going back to working for somebody else. And I think, organizations kind of need to do a temperature check on, with their people of all generations and kind of survey like really what the needs are of their staff. Because I mean, I've seen a mixed bag where some CEOs are like, no, you're coming back to the office, where other organizations are like, no, you guys are more productive at home. Let's do it. But yeah.
And the pandemic almost empowered people to do things that maybe they didn't think they had the strength or the courage to do because they didn't want to lose that, that security of the full-time job. But then all of a sudden, oh, well, I'm getting my work done. I've also got some extra time. I don't have to commute to work. I've got some time in the morning, some time in the evening. So yeah, a lot of people went into business for themselves. And I think you're right, Holly. And we're going to see, in my opinion, I think we're going to see more and more of, well, the employee is more empowered, and the companies, I believe, will have to go more to a hybrid structure of some sort if they were full-time back in the office. Because I know, we're seeing it, to your point, Holly, companies that are saying, hey, we're going to mandate that you come back to the office 5 days a week. Employees are like, you know what? There are opportunities out there now that I know I'm confident I can find that do not require that. And I like the flexibility. I like being able to work from home. I'm just as productive, if not more. So it's, workplaces have to adjust. And that's going to play into the battle for talent as people, continue to grow their staff and kind of recoup the losses that they may have had over the past year or so.
Totally agree, John. And I think one thing everybody says, we need to get higher wages. You got to be happy at work, right? I think now people want to have fun and be happy because, I mean, they're just not leaving work and quitting. They're putting signs up, posters that says, we're out of here. See ya. I mean,
I've never seen anything like that.
No, it's like, holy cow. I wonder how long that poster was up there until somebody said, hey, you know what? You're losing half of your staff. They didn't even say goodbye. They just said, we quit on a poster.
There was another sign I saw somewhere that a restaurant had put up asking the patrons' patience because their staff was short. They're like, hey, those that did show up for work are working as hard as they can. We're having a hard time getting people to show up for work. So please be patient with your service, type of thing. And again, it's such a weird mindset for business owners to be struggling to find people to do the job and to do the work. And I think you're right, Richard. It's not just about the money. People are now, they've come to the self-realization that, you know what, I want to be happy with what I'm doing. I want to enjoy where I do it and be compensated fairly. But it's not just about, oh, you'll pay me that. Okay, I'll put up with whatever you're going to give me.
Exactly. And all managers out there, you got to have that TLC, tender loving care these days. the way you talk to somebody, because trust me, they're going to go, boom, see ya. And the poster's on the board.
Because they know they can. That's what's crazy. We've seen it all over. I've seen it in my own company where, people are like, no, you know what? I don't want to come back to the office at all. So I've taken this job that allows me to work remote 100% of the time. And there are some companies out there that always had that model. And there are some companies now that have adopted that model, and the opportunities are out there for folks and they know it. So they're not afraid to jump ship and go somewhere else, which is going to hurt some companies. They're going to lose talent unless they become more flexible.
Exactly. So we're done with the we quit subject. We're done. Now we're going to think positive here, right? So, hey, Holly, we're going to deep dive into it with yourself. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you work for HR Connections. You are the owner and DEI consultant, which is exciting. We have a great topic today. So give us a little 5-minute tour of yourself.
Yeah. So basically, I'm an entrepreneur, a millennial, a mother, and I consider myself an anti-racism advocate. And so really that kind of centers like why I'm so passionate about the DEI space, consulting, and really trying to advocate for organizations to embrace diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. And so an extension of that is I have a book that's out that's written with all races in mind. And then I have a YouTube show that's an extension of that. So please understand. And it's really to kind of just representation matters. And so I just try to highlight these issues and bring them to the forefront, particularly right now in HR. And as we're trying to have a more diverse staff and really, since we're having that conversation, just to make sure it stays at the forefront.
So the types of companies that you consult with, a couple questions. I'm assuming it's all shapes and sizes, all industries, right?
Absolutely.
How often do you go into organizations where they just have not even had a clue about DEI and are starting from scratch versus those that have tried to get it going but need an extra push from someone like yourself to help them structure it to get it done right?
Sure, absolutely. So I've worked with companies that have like their idea of DEI is like, let me just find a training course that's stamped like DEI and then everyone takes it. But there's really no like initiatives in place that are really going to change like the infrastructure of the organization. So that can range from, for example, I've worked with companies that are small and, they have like maybe an HR department of one. So that person really has no idea of DEI or that's not really their specialty. So then I'm brought in there. And then like those that need a push, I try to find companies like, for example, I did a job fair where all the organizations at the time had social media promotions around looking, do you want to work somewhere diverse? We're big on DEI. So that was like Publix, Liberty Mutual. It was also, I can't even think. Oh, USPS. I couldn't think of it. USPS. So
it's a pretty big organization.
Yeah. United States Postal Service. They kept saying they wanted diversity in there. And so I put together an event and then they could just come to me for free and market to a diverse group of people. So those are organizations in a sense that are large and already kind of preach that and invest in that, but are looking for avenues to get different audiences. And since I'm in South Florida, that was a great place to bring them. So
I am also in South Florida. I didn't realize we were neighbors.
They are neighbors.
And that is the mecca for diversity. That's for sure. One of the things I love about South Florida, I walk into the office every day and when I do go in and it's like a little microcosm of the world and I love it.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And Publix and Liberty Mutual, they were like so thankful because they were like, oh my gosh, when I explained to them like, hey, this is the demographics that live here in South Florida, the quality of the candidates, they were like, yes. And so I've actually worked with them on a couple job fairs because they like the diversity that's there. So.
Very good. I get the sense sometimes, and tell me if you ever feel this and how you handle it, because I'm curious. So I believe some companies are truly committed to it and other companies are doing it because it's the thing to do and they feel they have to. And that's got to be challenging, if you will. Do you ever get that sense and end up having those hard conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, especially after the George Floyd incident, I think there was a big surge in the DEI industry. I believe it was like 30%. So like the consultants were definitely needed because everybody was jumping on board. But I think it's like, what are people trying to do to measure that data over time, and like what is a realistic outlook of when you implement these initiatives? And so I would kind of believe, like, if they're talking, okay, we have 3 years to get a percentage of this many people in leadership, or, you know, so I try to look for those kind of things. And if I don't see any type of measurable goals, and then you just kind of have to have those conversations, like, if you're not going to try and measure this, so to kind of gauge where you're at in this process, I mean, how committed are you? I mean, you need the data to track.
Yeah, because it's not just about hiring folks of diverse backgrounds for the purpose of hiring them. It's about, all right, what are you going to do once you get those people in the door? Like, what are you doing to make sure that they have just as much of an opportunity as everybody else to advance through the ranks? Because that's where we start to see big disparities, where you say, okay, well, you've got a good, you know, percentage at this level, but as you go up the food chain, those percentages drop drastically, correct?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I actually was on a call where a Black female employee was talking to the CEO, and she said actually it's quite disrespectful that there is not any, you know, people of color in leadership. She said it's starting to feel that way. And I said, you know, I can totally understand how that might be. And she was saying I would refer people, and they don't seem to like make it any further up the process. And so, yeah, I mean, those are just conversations that sometimes, while you may put these initiatives in place, you really got to have those, you need that honest feedback to say, is it really working? How are your employees feeling about it? Because that's the problem. Like, HR might do a good job and put a great program together, but if there's no measurement or feedback along the way, how do you know it's working? How's it impacting the culture at the organization? You know, so
it has to be in the forefront and has to be supported from the top down. If it's not supported from the top down, then we've got issues within that company, because it's got to be something that is genuine and authentic and real from the executive offices of a company, to make sure that there's an emphasis on it, not just, to your point, okay, every employee has to watch this 15-minute video to be compliant with their training. It's got to go much farther beyond that.
Yeah,
so true. And Holly, I got a question for you. So your current work staff that you deal with every day, how do you get them to buy in? And, you know, they have their own ways and stuff like this. You're bringing new employees in. What's the culture like this so you can support them also? Say they've been there for 20 years and now they're getting support. How do you focus on that?
Yeah, you know, what's so interesting, I think that's just where we're at. Everybody is so receptive to having the conversation. I'll be honest, like, I'll have people who like almost like talk my ear off. Like, I'm so happy I can actually feel comfortable asking these kind of questions, talking to somebody about my experience. And this is people from all races, right? Like white people being like, I didn't know that was offensive. And asking questions like, why is something this way, or why do we call it systemic racism, or just having those conversations, and then feeling like it's okay to ask those questions, and then me to answer them in a way that educates them and explains it to them, so they're like, oh, I just never realized. And sometimes you realize it's just a lack of education. And I think people are now more open-minded to it than they were even just like 5-6 years ago about even talking about these subjects, because it's like taboo. Do we talk about this at work? I don't know, you know?
You know, it's interesting. You raise a very good point, in the sense that a lot of people are thinking it, but they're just uncertain if they should speak up, because nowadays in the world that we live in, everybody's so daggone afraid to say what's on their mind, because they're afraid they're going to offend somebody, when it can be just a healthy discussion if the environment is presented as such, one of those safe zones where we're not going to judge each other. We're not going to hold anything against each other. We just want to have open, to your point, educational and informative discussions, just to understand, okay, how is this interpreted? And a lot of it is ignorance, where people don't realize that stuff that they're doing or saying might be considered offensive or improper or unfair. They don't know any different unless someone has the courage to say something. And then when they do, the person who's being talked to has to be open to listening and not get defensive about it. And I think that's where a lot of stuff breaks down, is people get so defensive and judgmental, and they can't have an open discussion with different, points of view.
because they're
Yeah.
set in their own ways. I mean, everybody's, this is what they've done for 20 years. Well, there's a time to change. But elaborating on that, I think, Holly, and you probably agree on this, that when you talk to people and they're changing, they're embracing the workforce and the culture is totally changing. They're like, wow, I finally got somebody to talk to about what I was scared to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, I've had people literally, I did like a business pitch competition, and this guy was like, I want to talk to you. And he literally talked to me for like an hour, just explaining, like, asking me all these questions about prejudice and what does it mean, like all these questions. And he was just like, I'm this white guy, but I just have all these questions. And I was just sitting there, just like kind of explaining, like, this is what this means. And he was like, well, I'm 60 years old. And he's like, I learned a lot.
It's funny. You have to always learn, and I'll throw something. I'll bare my soul a little bit here. So I have 3 kids, and they're all adopted, so they're all from South America. Okay. And I have learned a ton and had incredible discussions. My son is older; he'll be 25 next week, and my daughters are both in school in Florida. And, they're from South America, so they're darker complexioned. Now, I'm Italian, so I'm a little darker complexioned. And thankfully, I grew up in a household where, my parents didn't see color. And I grew up with, not a racist bone in my body, which thankfully I'm glad for that upbringing, because I think a lot of it starts in whatever home you're brought up with, because you're influenced by your parents and your friends. But my daughters were the ones that, and they're 20 and 22. And they've educated my wife and I a lot, because they associate more with people of color because of the color of their skin than they do Caucasian. And, I didn't even think of that. And it's like, all right, well, you're my kids. I look at my kids and, whatever. And obviously, I identify as a white male, and I look at them, I'm like, well, they're white females. And like, no, we don't identify like that. We identify as we're women of color because look at our skin. It's darker. And that opened our eyes. And again, that healthy discussion, I found that they were educating my wife and I on some of the things that they're dealing with in society that we never even realized that they were dealing with. So it was very eye-opening.
Yeah. And just how like you said, you don't see color. And I think your daughter's kind of projecting, saying, hey, well, we see ourselves as women of color, being like, well, other people clearly are seeing my skin color. Maybe you're not, but that's kind of like that reflection is like, because my adopted dad is white, and he'd say, I love everybody. I don't see skin color, but I would explain to him, well, you love me for me and you don't see it. Other people do. And they remind me that I am a woman of color, in other ways, whether it's in microaggressions or just telling me to my face, like reminding me. And so, but that's great that your daughters feel so comfortable to talk about it, and they educated you, because I think, these discussions are important,
Absolutely. And to your point, it's like, I would always talk to them, and it's like, we always have people of all races, creeds, colors, religions coming in and out of our house. It's like, we never cared, but how they were feeling, to your point, it's like, we don't see you as anything special or different or unique, but obviously you feel that way. The way you're treated sometimes by other people in the world. And that's where, I always shake my head and say, can we just get over this, everybody? Can we all just,
love everybody,
love each other, and a lot more love, a lot less hate, and just accept people for people. It's like, we're all humans.
We all have a heartbeat.
Unfortunately, there's always going to be love and hate in the world, and it's always a battle. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we just have a lot of history, I think, to unpack and educate people on, and with many of the conversations being had right now, since George Floyd, about, critical race theory, voter suppression laws, and everything that impacts not just, say, Black people, but all races. I think the conversation is just at the forefront, and we just realize there's a lot to unpack. Even just since George Floyd. So you're talking things that are hundreds of years in some instances in place, and to unpack all that. It just is going to take time and work, and people to be open-minded and allyship. Like, I think us even being here together and having this conversation is, very important. And so.
Well, it's something that it's got to be discussed, and it's hopefully not going anywhere. And, it's going to be, consistent in our culture, until we get to a point where, you know, it's not as big an issue. I feel, and I'm interested to your perspective. So I feel that over the course of my lifetime, not a young guy, but I'm not an old guy, that, you know, I saw racial tensionings easing, and then they got worse. And I struggle trying to figure out, well, how did that happen? Because it seemed like we were making progress. And again, to your point, not just black or white, but across the spectrum, all minorities. And it seemed like things were getting better. And then we took a turn for the worse over the last decade. It seems like it got worse, and now we're trying to get better again. Am I off base there?
So no, I think that's how it may appear, like the media, or I think just things weren't being said. What I experienced was a lot of microaggression. And we just didn't feel comfortable speaking about it. And I think a lot of the events in the last decade, since Obama became president and going forward, I think it has empowered a lot of minorities to speak up about the things that were happening to them decades previously that they weren't going to say anything. Like when we talk about, black men being pulled over more often by police than, say, their white counterparts, it's not to say that wasn't happening. It's just we weren't talking about it. We weren't watching for the statistics like we are now. Things weren't being filmed like they are now. And so, no, it was happening. And I think minorities were just keeping it to themselves in their communities. And I think because of just recent events in the last decade, people feel empowered to talk about their experiences, and now have just realized, like, yeah, this isn't just like a moment anymore. It's a movement. And we have to keep that momentum going to really, you know, eradicate some of these problems in society. So that's kind of what I think that is from.
So how do you advise? So let's say you go into a company and they have no minorities on their executive team, and there's a vacancy. Okay. Yeah. So they say, all right, this is our opportunity to make this happen. Where do you start? Like, for some, you know, for a company to say, all right, this has to be part of our strategy for growth. How do you coach them or counsel them as far as, all right, well, here's how you should go about finding this new person?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's one, you know, auditing their own job ads and descriptions to make sure it has inclusive language that will reach diverse candidates. But also, I think giving them advice that, hey, what are your traditional candidate pools where you're pulling from? Have you considered HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities? Have you considered just creating a program that is specific to minorities? I think that's kind of what I'm seeing happening over the last year is, like, all of a sudden a lot of organizations are like, oh, putting HBCUs on the map, that's where we're going to pull some of our Black talent, our minority talent, or they have programs specifically now to catch people in the Latinx community, and just to gather minorities from different, you're seeing programs specific to that to hopefully if they take that path, they'll become leaders in the company. So I think it's really just companies need to evaluate their recruiting strategies on how, you know, where they're pulling their talent from.
Totally agree.
Because, you know, you find that even at companies I've worked for, it's like they would go to colleges, but it was definitely like, you know, your bigger, predominantly white institutions. It's like HBCU, what is that? You know, like, and there's a lot of talented students there, you know, and getting great educations. And so I think it's just people need to open their eyes that, you know, you don't have to just pull something from, you know, your applicant tracking system that came in or whatever. You know, you might just have to open your eyes to more ways.
I love how you said that, Holly, because that's one of my trademarks. I go into inner cities, I go to high schools and stuff like that where no other recruiters go. And I'm the only one there. And they're like just embracing everything I can offer them. You know, it's amazing.
Great. No, that's
and
great.
if you show them interest, they're going to be there. I mean, a diverse crowd is there for jobs. We just have to find the pockets, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's exactly. I think people need to learn how to partner with these organizations, you know, and find out, like, if you're looking for more veterans, partner with the veteran organizations. It just depends, like, because that's what I do. Like, literally, by partnering with different segments, I mean, that's how people find me. Like, this one guy's like, you want veterans? Partner with these organizations if you want to target them. And I was like, okay, thanks. You know,
it's more than just placing an ad and saying veterans encouraged to apply.
Right.
That never works.
That's our strategy. We're going to encourage people to apply.
Post and pray, right? Hey, Holly, I got a question for you. So what are you seeing with like diversity pay rates when you're going into companies and stuff like that? How are you changing this so we can all be on the same level?
Yeah, like having those conversations, I think going to the point of, pay equity, in terms of making sure it's aligned. And so I've had, like, for example, I had a situation where we were having a discussion because some of the Black employees at a company were basically saying they didn't feel like they were being paid the same and as like their white counterparts for the same positions. And I guess it got out somewhere that that say the black professional had been working there a lot longer than the white professional and he was making more. And then it was like, well, no, he had more education. But then it just came into having that conversation. Well, what support has the company given, say, the Black employee so he can, be equitable to his white counterpart? And I think that is the issue, is I think people aren't getting into the details and really analyzing, like, is it just because he's coming in with degree and this experience? Is it just that simple? Or where's this person coming from? Did you analyze if they even had access to those resources or opportunities to be able to even be competitive? And so I think that's the conversation, is just like, if you're going to recruit minorities, is also considering other factors to kind of to bring them, to make everything equitable, right? So if that means that this person needs extra professional development, extra education, provide that support if that's what you're needing to justify the pay. But yeah, I think that needs to be examined a lot more.
Do you see, like, in the companies, like I see a lot of companies now are using a social worker or a counselor to guide them through the resources. Are you seeing that these days?
I've only seen that in a few places. I know a lot of people are heavily relying on like the DEI companies in general, because they kind of tend to cover all of that. I mean, I know a few DEI companies that, are booked like for the next 4 years, like with consulting, because so many people are trying to revamp, like, not only pay, but like getting more minorities into leadership. And it's a large task, because I think people, like you said, think DEI is just like, take a course, learn about unconscious bias, and this is racism, and this is what it's not. It's just like, no, there's like, it's a whole infrastructural change. And so,
Exactly.
Yeah.
You got to eat and sleep it, man. You just got to,
You do. And to your point earlier, you've got to provide the opportunities. So, if you're a company that, like, hopefully a lot of companies like ours included, you like to promote from within. You like to have folks stay with your company and have that growth path. Well, if you don't have a diverse base that is there, that has the chance to grow from within, well, then you've got to start cultivating it at those levels so they have a chance to rise up. You can't always just bring someone in. Okay, well, we'll bring someone here, or we'll just hire a lot of people down here, but we'll keep them down here. You've got to have that opportunity to kind of recreate that dynamic and that demographic within your company. But again, it's got to be something that is embraced by the executive team and by HR to permeate that message throughout the company when folks are doing their hiring.
Well, I got a tip for executive people. They have to get out on the streets, right, Holly? They can't be in the boardroom all day, 24/7, just reading videos and looking at social media. You got to get out there in the streets and talk.
They got to do a ride along with the shark, Richard.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that'll be a trip and a half.
Like undercover boss with like Richard and making like.
I'd be like, take the shirt tie off, put a t-shirt on like me, some shorts, and let's go.
So funny. Oh my gosh. These are great, healthy conversations. And I'm really, really psyched that we had this episode and that we had Holly on.
Exactly.
You're in the forefront of it, and obviously fighting that fight, and a fight that's going to continue. And it's nice to see your passion too.
Got it.
Yeah. No, I have like 2 little girls, and so if I can pave the way and make it much easier for them, I think that's how I look at it. I have skin in the game, not just myself being a minority, but for the next generation. So if I can make it easier for them, absolutely, I got to keep fighting.
So tell us about your book. You mentioned you have a book earlier.
Yeah. So it's called "It's Not About You, So Please Understand: The Social Textbook to Understanding Concepts about racism, related to racism and people of color. And so it's a short book. It's less than 100 pages. It's on Amazon. It's available in Kindle paperback and hardcover. And so basically, the book is written with all races in mind, and it explains, like, from the perspective pretty much of Black people, but that kind of how history is written. It is written in a way, particularly in America, that minimizes the experience of minorities, all minorities in general. And so, and then it goes into explaining the difference between being racist, non-racist, and anti-racist, what white privilege is. And then at the end of the book, there is anti-racism resources. So as an organization, an individual, as a parent, we provide literally a list of books, podcasts, documentaries that you can watch, actions you can take to be more anti-racist. So yeah.
You're helping to spark that discussion.
Yes, absolutely. Like, it's something that I actually have the book here. So here I am.
We're going to get to see it.
Yeah.
Nice
Right.
cover. I like it.
Yeah. So it's, and it's super thin. It's an easy read. Well, you know,
That's good for me.
Yeah, like, no, we wanted it to be very, like, objective and just kind of explain the facts, explain what systemic racism is, and just in a short manner. We didn't want people to get caught up in it, dwelling on it for too long. We just wanted to say, here's some facts, we're presenting it, so people can understand some of the terms that were being thrown around after George Floyd and what it really meant. Because I think the anti-racism, that was getting thrown around a lot. Ibram Kennedy, he has a book, How to Be Anti-Racist. And so that term was being tossed around. And so we just tried to break down some of the terms that were being thrown around about, like, white privilege and.
Love it. How often is that part of your teaching recommendations for the companies that you're consulting with for their people?
Oh, absolutely. Like, it's part of it. Like, so if you book with me, I pretty much bring the books so everybody
Awesome.
can read it. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
So, yeah, it's all
Love
over
that.
my.
It's great to have a tool like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
guess what, Holly? The Staffy Shark's going to buy one. So you look out.
You'll
Okay, thank you.
you'll get 2 sales from today's show.
Okay, perfect. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So it's gotten great reception from a lot of people. So yeah, I appreciate it. I'm happy of the outcome.
I love it. The passion.
What's the future hold for Holly? Where do you want to take this, and where do you want to take your business?
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully I continue to do the DEI consulting. Also, I'm in the process, hopefully soon, to start writing a second book, kind of talking in the sense of the new Jim Crow era, talking about, like, all these laws and these conversations around things that will potentially continue to marginalize minorities if we don't do something about it. And, like, also on my YouTube show, highlighting stories, you know, about representation and just talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, I live and breathe it. So
It's evident you're passionate about it, which is awesome.
thanks.
You're not just a facade.
No,
She's the real deal.
Real deal for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Real deal. And when
You're
I
walking
say
the
that,
walk.
yes.
Very cool.
Johnny, any final thoughts on today?
You know what? If the things that stuck out to me today, Richard, are a couple things. DEI is not going away, and it's something that's important to our culture. So if companies aren't on board, they got to get on board, but it's got to come from the top down. And one of the biggest takeaways from today is, you know, don't be afraid to have candid conversations. And in doing so, it's not that you have to necessarily agree or disagree. It's just that you have to listen and understand. And I think that's the most important takeaway that I hope a lot of our viewers and listeners took away from today. That's what hit home for me.
Totally agree. Holly, any final thoughts?
Nice, Richard and John, I want to thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be on here and, you know, share, just talking about diversity and inclusion. I think I love having these conversations with people, and I love how you both are just so open-minded and really embrace it. And so I'm thankful, you know, to be on here. Like, it was a great conversation.
Well,
You're
I have
awesome.
to say, you're an awesome guest. I learned so much today. I'm going to learn more from the book. I can't wait. But I think the biggest takeaway for me is make an impact. You know, we all have to look in the mirror and say, let's do it together. and that's it. Love all and make an impact.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Holly, for coming on. Next
Thank
week,
you.
same time, same place. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Take care.